Hey, Kua.
Hey, Kendra.
We're back for another episode.
Another episode.
I know. I always love coming together and just talking about all things DEI because we go through this every day. But if for whatever reason, when we have our podcast, it's there's joy in it because
That's
I get
true.
to do it with my friends.
I think that's the biggest thing, right? It's an opportunity for us to bring on wonderful guests.
Yes.
We have a guest we're going to talk to in just a second, but get into community, and I think that's one of the biggest things as leaders that we really need to make sure that we're staying grounded with each other, and this is definitely one of those ways that we get to do that.
And reconnect.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we have a hot topic for today.
We're going to dive into the
hot topic.
Let's do it. So the hot topic is coming from Fortune, and it says that resenteeism.
I know that's hard to say.
I know. Resenteeism is the latest trend plaguing workers, and it's even more dangerous than quiet quitting. And so it says at the height of the Great Resignation last year, it didn't take much for most workers to quit their jobs for greener pastures. Whether or not they regretted it, things look much different today. So now they're talking about this economy, which is a little bit different, and they're talking about different layoffs and recession fears, but more people are staying put because of that, even if they're unhappy. And that phenomenon has now led to this new buzzword, resenteeism. And so they said it's dubbed as a natural successor to quiet quitting. Resenteeism describes the act of staying in an unsatisfying job due to a perceived lack of better options or fear of job insecurity. And a worker in those circumstances begins to actively resent their current workplace and often doesn't do a great job of hiding it. So what happens? They resent their job. They don't want to be there. And that then trickles into maybe other areas and impacting other people. And so they're talking about employees that feel undervalued, underappreciated, and worried about their futures are never going to be happy in their jobs. And now there's a rise of this feeling that's happening in the workplace. So what does that mean? What does that mean?
Yeah. And also, too, I find it interesting. They were talking about it's a rejection to hustle culture, right?
Yeah.
So I think growing up, we always talk about how you had to hustle in your job and you had to make sure that you finished projects or you were assigned to stretch assignments,
right?
Things of that nature. But now it's even if I did all that, what's the result? So if I'm quiet quitting or resenteeism, resenting my job, right, I'm still getting the same result.
Right.
So I think this is all talking about tying back into overall employee engagement, open communication with your employees as well, and really empowering leaders to lead.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And it's more than just having weekly meetings and check-ins. It's expecting leaders to actually go beyond that.
I think it's interesting, too, because so Esther Perel, she's that famous psychologist who does a lot of work with counselors and things like that. She talked about this notion of where this responsibility is being placed. There's a lot of people who are coming into the workplace after COVID and feeling a different way about their jobs, but now the expectation, you used to go talk about that with maybe your friends or family and had that connection. Now you're bringing that to the workplace and saying, this is y'all problem to solve.
Right.
Y'all have to solve this. There's a shift that has been happening in terms of your overall happiness and what that looks like. And now more employers are feeling that from a sense of, okay, what do we have to do to keep these people engaged, where there might have been a different balance in the past and now that's not happening.
Right. Well, I think because with COVID, it forced you to look at your priorities differently.
Right.
Right. So again, if you're going to get the same result while I'm hustling, why not quiet quit or resent my job and still get the same result? Right. No promotions or whatever the case may be.
True.
Right.
That's true.
So, and I think it's happening with the younger generation. What can I do to kind of not skate on by, but again, still get the same result and maybe build my business on the side?
Yeah.
So I think COVID has forced people to look at things differently.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think they also mentioned in the article that resenteeism should come to no surprise because more than half, and it says 57% of Gen Z workers and 66% of millennials are satisfied at their job. And this is a MetLife survey that came in 2022. So although they hate their jobs, they're staying in place because guess what? You need some money to survive.
Getting benefits.
And getting benefits, right? And so now we're into this next phase of what this looks like. And the reality is 2019 seems like it was just yesterday, but that was 3 years ago at this point, right?
Crazy. That's
Is
crazy.
that 3 years ago?
About 3 years ago.
3 and change?
About 3.
Oh, about 3. Okay. So at this point, we are grieving what once was, but now we're in this new position of what is.
Yes.
And I think people are still struggling to figuring out what that new normal looks like.
Yeah, and the workforce is changing, and people need tools.
Absolutely.
In order to thrive.
Yeah.
So I think this is a perfect segue to introduce our guests and what that looks like. So we have Miss Stephanie Peete with us.
Hey.
Who is, her new title is Director of Workforce Development, right?
Yep.
For Say Yes Buffalo.
Yep.
First of all, congratulations on that promotion.
Yes,
Look, she's been working.
But we always say like your title is your title, but Stephanie does all the things.
A lot of
things. We're going to talk about all of that too.
Absolutely.
But Stephanie, do you want to introduce yourself to the people?
Sure. So I'm Stephanie Peete. As Kendra already said, I'm Director of Workforce Development at Say Yes Buffalo. I am also co-owner of Second Chapter Bookstore.
Hey.
Yeah, Black-owned, Black-focused bookstore with my mom.
Let's go.
Yes.
Well, so
we're going to dive into that.
We got to dive into that too, because this is something that you recently launched.
Yeah, last
Super
month.
excited about that.
Timing was a little crazy.
Why was that?
Because this promotion and doubling our team and this.
But you got it though.
She does it gracefully. Yeah. She wears it gracefully. But congrats on that.
Thank you.
Congrats on that.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit more about yourself. Like, what does your role look like? What's your day to day? What you up to these days?
So I lead our workforce development initiative. So that includes our youth apprenticeship work that was recently launched last year. So we're in our second year of our pilot. And it's really an opportunity for kids coming out of BPS, high school, to access the workforce quicker.
Okay.
Not everyone wants to go to college or can go to go to college, full time after graduation. So this gives them the opportunity to work, and they can take some higher ed coursework if they higher ed coursework to pursue a degree.
Okay.
And be able to access a full time job in 2 to 3 years where they're making at least $45,000 a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
Which could be a game changer for a lot of students, I'm sure.
And that's above the salary for minimum wage in Buffalo, right?
Absolutely. More than half of our kids are coming from households of like $25,000 or less. So it's literally life changing.
Okay.
We also have our paid internship program for our college students. That has been in existence for about 7 years now.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. That came fast too.
Yeah.
I feel like that's been, something that you had talked about a long time ago, and now you're already 7 years into what that looks like. So I think for you, it's really interesting because you're working with, these are students in high school. So you're working with this generation.
Yeah.
What do you see as it relates to like this newer generation and what that looks like?
They don't take no mess.
Yeah.
And we had one apprentice calling us the first week they got me doing this and I don't like it. We're just hold on,
okay.
You got to give it time.
Yeah.
They are the first generation to grow up with the internet their whole lives, so there's no smoke and mirrors with them. They've seen it. They know what's happening. They've seen all the financial turmoil, and they're just like, we ain't with it.
Yeah.
And they really want to be affirmed. I feel like millennials kind of kick the door in, talking about self-care and work-life balance, and Gen Z is just they threw bricks through the windows.
Yeah. Bricks.
Yes. And they will switch a job in a heartbeat too.
Yes. So, and for them, they'll rather do a couple side gigs where they're not stressed out than be in a workplace where they're stressed out or they feel undervalued or disrespected. So it's different.
Yeah. It's different, and from an employer standpoint too, right?
And also too, from an employer standpoint, because most of the time we, from an employer perspective, you get people in the door right after college or they've worked a few years, whatever the case may be. But now is the time to also interview the employer, right? And so, and to shop around.
Oh yeah.
So it's again looking at workforce development. So for the companies that you work with, what is some of the best practices? So for some of the apprentices who go in and they thrive and they're like, this is where I want to work after I finish this program, what are some of those best practices that you see?
So we always say hire at least in twos so they don't feel alone.
Okay.
So if you're the only young person or the only young person of color, we are talking about BPS where 81% of them are young people of color. There's over 80 languages spoken in the district. So so if you're the only one, it's going to be really isolating. So at least hiring in twos. And we always tell them, there is multiple investments to take into consideration. So yes, there's the financial investment because you're paying them. But it's also who is going to be able to support an 18-year-old in the workplace. It's not just getting them acclimated to the work. It's getting them acclimated to adulthood. So you have to really be someone who can nurture and be patient. So it's really key to find what department or what people can actually support them. Because that can really make or break the relationship.
What about from a standpoint of the employer side of that? Because I know we had talked a little bit earlier around like employer readiness, because employers have to be ready to take on maybe an intern that's coming out of the Buffalo Public Schools. But what, I guess from that standpoint, what have the characteristics of those organizations been like that people like the most that are coming into those roles?
I mean, I think the organizations who are vulnerable and willing to have the hard conversations so far. So we are a CareerWise affiliate. CareerWise was born in Denver. Their apprenticeship model was great, so they started to recreate it across the country through CareerWise USA.
Okay.
So our community is the only one that embeds racial equity into the employer part of it. You know, say as Buffalo, we're rooted in racial equity. We take it very seriously and we're upfront about it. So our employers go through a series of racial equity learning opportunities to make sure that regardless of where they're coming in, because, you know, every organization is different. Some are, like, really progressive with their DEI strategy. Some folks, they're so small, or maybe they just haven't done anything yet. So we want to make sure that we're giving them the opportunity to develop real skills that they can use in real time to make sure they're supporting our kids. So, yeah, we're really honest about that, and it's in our MOU, so it's required.
Okay.
Oh, yes. Come on, MOU, put on the sign that dotted line.
Sign that line.
So, and to go off of that, when you were talking about racial equity, and I know we've talked about this, Stephanie, about, you know, really now you're looking at not two different paths, similar but different in terms of racial equity and diversity, equity, inclusion. And so I think when you're looking and you're talking to many employers, they're like, yeah, we have DEI, right?
We don't say DEI.
Right. Yeah, racial equity. So can you talk about that and what that actually means? Because a lot of employers don't always take it that step further.
Yeah, I mean, you're talking about the racism that exists in Buffalo. Like, a lot of people don't want to talk about it, but it exists. We know what the statistics are. Although, you know, DEI is very broad, we're not going to get anywhere if we're not going to talk about racism. It's particularly anti-Black racism.
Okay.
So we're very honest about it. So we have this employer think tank series that we developed during the pandemic, and now we're bringing it back in person with funding through the Oshai Foundation. And our first topic is decolonization. We purposely did not say DEI. So we're like, either we're going to scare a bunch of folks off. Thankfully, a lot of people came. A week and a half later, we had 100 people confirmed to attend. So I think people they have an appetite for the conversation. They probably just don't know how to go about it. Because, I mean, it's scary to talk about when you feel like you don't know what to say. So we're just going to have the conversation and allow people in to participate, and hopefully, you know, it sparks conversation and learning, and, like, it can deepen relationships.
Yeah, I think it's really, I think it's important in terms of what you're talking about too, because oftentimes, you know, we have this umbrella of DEI and what that looks like, but we've also more recently, I feel like, have been talking about specifics, needing to be specific about what it is that you're talking about. So I know that's how BIPOC, the word BIPOC even was created, because they wanted to be specific around when we say it's not just, communities of color, people of color. We're talking Black, Indigenous, and people of color, you know, all in one term, but being more specific on what it is that you're trying to accomplish, right? So saying anti-Black racism is very specific. You know, Buffalo has a very specific past and history. And what you find oftentimes is people, they're not all the way clued into what that looks like from a historic lens. So what are the, I guess, like the conversations that you're having with employers, and what's their ownership in that piece, right? So you're educating them to have the awareness, but then what? What happens after that?
So, I mean, so we start off actually, so this year was a little different. We started off with an anti-bias hiring training that we actually put on ourselves. That was 2 hours.
Anti-bias hiring.
Yep.
Okay.
So anyone who's involved in interviewing, hiring, and onboarding our apprentices have to come to that.
Okay.
And then next up, we're actually doing a racial equity impact analysis training through the Community Foundation. That's really important because it's hyper local.
Yep.
So we're focused on what the problems are in Buffalo.
Right.
So we're like setting the stage. This is the issue that we have, and because you're part of this program, you're saying that you want to do something about it.
Right.
So it really lays like the groundwork for us working together as a cohort. You know, we meet monthly with our employers. Again, we're the only community that does that, because it's like we need to make sure we're having high touch points.
Yeah.
You know, we're co-creating this together. Is there anything that you're struggling with? Let's talk about it as a group. So we're really like
being intentional.
Yeah.
You have to be intentional. And I think also too with the program overall, and you're talking about racial equity, and we always say once you not necessarily solve for it, because it's going to be a journey, but once you start to have conversations about it, you can solve for so many other problems that are out there, right? And I think even being hyper focused on Buffalo communities and employers will also narrow that gap of the have and the have-nots down the line, right? And so we know obviously there's a huge poverty gap, or a huge there's an increase in poverty over years, but there's also a gap of have and have-nots. And ultimately, it's going to solve for that issue, right? And if you make the investment now, you won't have the resenteeism, can never say it, or the quiet quitting, right? You won't have those things that are popping up because you're solving for that right now, right? And tackling, racial equity.
Yeah, and it's I think the other thing that we often talk about are systems, because we know that, you can do trainings and education and give people tools and share language. But the reality is, at the core of the issue are systems that have been put in place for a very long time, that are rooted in dominant cultural norms. And those are the things that we don't often get to talk about, from that lens. So I guess, even from that perspective, are you noticing these employers being open to receiving it?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I would say even when you're looking at the roles, so our youth apprenticeship work, we're in advanced manufacturing, business ops, and IT.
Interesting.
So we're having folks I'll use M&T as an example. I love working with them. They're taking roles that are traditionally 4-year degree requirements. So junior accountant, and saying we're going to teach an 18-year-old how to do this work.
I love that.
So that's something in and of itself.
Yeah.
We're addressing the systems that have, barred a lot of people of color from being in these roles because they didn't have that degree. But they're saying, you know what, we'll show you how to do it, and you take some coursework along the way.
Right.
That's interesting to me, even from that lens, because we're often hearing, oh, we can't find people. We don't have access. There's a pipeline issue. But also realizing that, hey, y'all ain't gonna have the workforce if you don't invest now is probably a big indicator too for them.
And I think also too, you were saying with just the overall engagement has been very high. Say Yes overall has created the trust with the community.
Absolutely.
And that for me is the foundation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because Say Yes has been around for a while now, 10 plus years. Great leader. Great people like yourself working for Say Yes. And Dave, let's call him out because we love Dave.
Yes, we do.
Dave. I might not win it.
So Dave, if you listen, we got people who have your back, okay?
Right.
But Dave is a leader who empowers other folks, right? And so building that trust is really essential. And then you going out to community members and employers and saying, hey, we've built this trust and this credibility. Yeah. Now it's time for you to come on board. And I think that is great, right? Because even when you're talking about DEI work or racial equity work within the workforce now, people feel like sometimes it's being shoved down their throat, right? It's it's mandatory. I got to sit here. I got to do this. But if you build trust over time, it's going to come, right? It's going to happen. So
for folks that don't know, we always we talk because we're amongst friends, but Dave Rust is the CEO of Say Yes Buffalo.
Yes.
And he's built a lot of credibility, I think, in communities of color specifically, just based on how he leads, right?
Absolutely.
And being an example behind that. Yeah. So give a little context where we can.
So I get Dave.
Right?
Dave,
right.
come on to the podcast.
We do have to get Dave on the podcast. And he said he would, so for sure. Yeah. I guess another question I wanted to talk about, because this conversation around generations everybody is talking about. I literally was talking about it earlier today from a generational standpoint. COVID obviously had a lot to do with how the shift in work and our approach to work is, but there's also nuance around Gen Z feeling as though, hey, we have all the information because we have access to that maybe on the internet. I'm wondering, have you seen what conversations come to mind in these young people that you're working with and their approach to work, and what are you seeing? Any trends or anything that you've noticed?
I think we're seeing that they like to integrate work and life. We have one apprentice who is blogging about her apprenticeship.
Okay.
And how she's navigating life, in this new space. And I will say that I think a lot of our kids are just hungry for an opportunity. They've been very humble for the most part.
Okay.
So we haven't seen that too much with our kids, but I know I am aware of what you're talking about. But yeah, I think even when we first launched, we had 200 kids put in almost 1,300 applications.
Oh, wow.
Because we had some kids who were like applying to everything. Like, I just want an opportunity. I want to do this.
Okay.
So I think that just shows like,
they're hungry.
Yeah. You know, this hasn't been an opportunity for them in the past. So, yeah.
That's
awesome. So you're balancing the work part. Now you opened up a bookstore. Yeah. So tell us about that. How did it come about? All those things.
So there was a show that got canceled because it was kind of corny. Called Single Parents.
I've heard of it.
Nobody has watched it.
I've heard of it. I've never watched it, but I heard it.
one other person who was watching it. Until it got canceled.
Okay.
But there was a black woman on the show. I think her name was Poppy, and she had like this winebrary is what she called it. It was like a feminist bookstore. You can like go. Ooh. You can buy books, or you can like sit there and hang out with your friends, drink some wine. I was like, I would go there if I had that. And so I just kept thinking about it. So I told my mom one day, we were like at Tapo actually downtown. And I was like, told her about it. I'm like, I would love to do this, but focus on like black culture. And she thought it was a great idea. We started talking about it, and then, you know, we got busy, and then it was just like, okay, one day maybe. Yeah. And then she retired and then called me up and was like, come over on Monday, we're going to do it. And I was just like, oh, okay. And so we filed in February of last year and then launched January of this year. So,
awesome.
Like, literally,
So give us some context around that, too, for the people, because we're also going to tag in the show notes where to find you.
So we are, right now we're an online bookstore. We are looking for a physical location. Buffalo's still a little wild with the real estate, commercial real estate. So we're working on that. But what we're doing is actually creating the vibe that we want in our own space and other spaces. So we're hosting these like really curated book club experiences where there's a facilitated discussion, because some folks are like scared to talk about a book. Maybe you don't feel like you sound smart or like you get it. Like it can be very intimidating. Kind of, you know, it's a little snooty.
Yeah,
it is. I get it. It can feel very snooty. But there was like, our first one was a live DJ. There was food. There was alcohol. Like a facilitated discussion, so you can just hop in. You know, we made it very like approachable. Yeah. So. Yeah, so that's what we're trying to do. Is, like, get people excited about reading, bringing people together, like celebrating the Black experience. Yeah. So it's been fun.
That sounds like a vibe that I need to check out for sure. You said you had me at DJ
and wine.
Well, the wine,
or
but
alcohol.
Food.
Yeah.
Alcohol. All the things.
All the things. So right now it's for just adults. Are you thinking about bringing it down to the kids level?
Yeah. So my mom's a retired teacher, so she's focused
on nice.
She's focused on a family literacy series that she's actually playing that right now.
I love it.
Yeah. So up next we're doing it. We focused on Black Joy, stories of resistance, resilience, and restoration. An amazing book. So we sold out pretty quickly, and there were a lot of people who wanted to attend. So we're doing another one at the end of this month, but we're doing a brunch. So it's we're gonna remix it.
Oh, see, and brunch.
Okay, I love that. That's definitely curated. Yeah. And I like that because you're gonna get people, like you said, the average person who may be intimidated to go to a book discussion, and I love that.
Yeah. So where can the people find you?
secondchapterbookstore.com.
secondchapterbookstore.com. Okay. Any social media handles you want to shout out on that?
Same thing on LinkedIn, because I'm old. Facebook and Instagram, which are social media manager handles, because I refuse.
There you go.
I refuse.
Yes.
Why you refuse?
I'm tired.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a lot.
That's fair.
It's a lot.
It is a lot.
You heard she got a social media manager, y'all.
Yeah, we started this intentional, like knowing that there was no way, because I work so much, that I could handle all those things. So having a bookkeeper, our web developers, like, on retainer, so if there's like a big edit, like, hey,
you handle it.
Because I mean, me trying to figure it out for 2 hours, I'd rather pay you to do it in 30 minutes.
Yes. We talk about outsourcing all the time.
It's just, you have to be realistic. You can't do it all. You just
finding your level of genius too. Right. Like where's your time best spent?
Yeah, I do what I'm good at, the book stuff, the events, the ordering of the books, and then my mom handles the operation side, works with the bookkeeper and all that.
I love a mother-daughter duo.
Yes.
I love it.
It's fun. It's fun. We'll argue like business partners, and then she'll like give me the look like,
I'm still your mom.
Like, all right, guys gotta fall in line now.
Right. Like, all right, ma. Okay.
I love that. So, do we want to go to gem of the day?
Let's do it. Yes. What's your gem?
A colleague of mine recently was trying to get me to understand that I need to let things go. I don't remember who. I think it was Deirdre Wright. I'm in the Institute of Nonprofit Practice cohort. I think it was her who said it, so I'll give her credit. So hopefully I'm right. She said, I have to learn how to invite people into my passion.
Explain that.
Invite folks in about the things that I'm excited about, the projects I'm working on, so they're excited about it and can take on some of the ownership. Of the work.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm so very used to, I'm from nonprofits.
Yeah.
Like, I'll do it. I'll figure it out.
Yeah.
I'll get it done. And
Yep.
I'm learning to okay.
And
you can help, and
yes.
you should want to help, and here's how you can do this, and delegating, and
power and delegating.
getting other people excited about the work. So I'm learning how to do that.
Yeah, I think the sustainability in that, though, in sharing that passion and inviting others in, allows you to go further, for a longer period of time,
absolutely.
too.
Yeah, but it takes time, though.
Wearing all the hats.
It definitely takes time.
Yeah, it does.
So
it does. I love it. I love it. Well, we're super excited to talk to you today. Thank you for coming on.
Yes.
Did you want to shout out any other? Listen, she says you don't like the social media side of it. I want to say where people find you and information
on me,
on you. Say Yes and the program.
Okay, so sayyesbuffalo.org. We're also all over social media. For me, primarily LinkedIn. I enjoy it.
Stephanie drops all the gems on LinkedIn. I'm like, what is
she on LinkedIn? It's not an aesthetic. It's just words. I don't like dealing with the aesthetic of Instagram.
I can see that.
It's too much work.
I can see that. I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah, but Stephanie be dropping gems on LinkedIn, so follow her.
Stephanie Peete.
Yes.
On LinkedIn. Well, thank you for coming on the show. We truly appreciated the conversation, and we will tag everything in the show notes.
Yes.
So,
thanks, Steph.
all right, y'all. Another episode.
Bye.
In the books. Peace.